Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another HackerNoon podcast. Today we have a guest I'm really excited about. We have Arjen from Vertigo Games. If everyone isn't as hardcore into VR gaming as I am, Vertigo Games is the developer of the widely popular Arizona Sunshine, which I would say is one of, if not the most popular zombie game in VR to date. How's it going, Arjen? Thanks very much for being here today.
Hi, it's fine here. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. So I'm sure most people in the VR gaming scene are aware of you, but for the people who aren't, could you just please briefly introduce Vertigo Games to them and what your company is about?
I'm Arjen. I'm a programmer at Vertigo Games, and we make it's a little bit chopped up in a couple of pieces. The main part is that we make just VR games. We don't make non-VR games. We very specialize on the VR aspect, and I think that's also reflected in our games. Like, we are very polished VR interactions and titles, and there's also the part where we work together with smaller VR studios and release their games to the broader audience. And for example, Fisherman still we published them, and soon to be released the Traffic Jams is coming out. Also a very fun VR game. So we kind of try to populate the VR market that way, while making also very polished VR titles ourselves. So yeah.
Cool. And have you been with the company since the very beginning, Arjen?
No, Vertigo Games is about 10 years old now, and I've been here about 3.5 years. So basically, when I came here, they already released Arizona Sunshine for the PC version for Steam and Oculus, and they were working on the PlayStation version. So I started there like in the middle of the heat, basically. They were like crunching and working hard to get everything ready. And the very first project I worked on was the Deadman DLC. That's where I actually jumped in, and they were also working on Skyworld at the time. So around that time I joined the company. Yeah.
Cool. What were you doing before you came to Vertigo Games? Could you just tell us a little bit about your career experience?
Well, before that, I was still a student. Like, after I graduated, I worked at Vertigo Games, but I did a couple of internships. My first introduction to the VR development was at Handy Games in Germany. We made a little kiting game for the Rift, and then we had to port that to the Gear VR. So that was my first real challenge with all the optimization stuff, and that's with that experience I came here at Vertigo Games. Just basically a perfect fit.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's quite lucky that your first job after university was with Vertigo Games.
Well, I lived in Rotterdam, and they were also stationed here in Rotterdam. So I just applied and got in.
Nice. And again, for our viewers that aren't too familiar with you and your company, could you briefly give an explanation of Arizona Sunshine, what it's about, and what the gameplay is like?
Arizona Sunshine is a single player and co-op, story-driven, I would say, a zombie shooter with a lot of multiplayer aspects, and I think that's what makes it unique with the rest of all the shooters at there, because you can play the campaign in co-op mode with a really amazing voice actor, good story, and then besides that we have the hard modes where you can beat your score, beat other scores, and so that's basically in a nutshell Arizona Sunshine.
I see. And I just wanted to congratulate you guys on such a great game. You've made such an amazing world with Arizona Sunshine. It's one of the most downloaded games of all time on the Oculus Quest, Oculus Rift, and most likely on the Oculus Quest 2 as well. But of course, porting a game for the Oculus Quest comes with its challenges. As we all know, the hardware of the original Oculus Quest wasn't the best, and in some cases developers had to make certain sacrifices or compromises to get games to work on that system. So in what aspects of the game did you and your team have to make sacrifices to get it to work smoothly on the Oculus Quest? Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, the Oculus Quest is basically mobile hardware. And before we talk on the specifics on how we downgraded the game, not really downgrade, but you have to make compromises. The Quest is a very amazing headset, I believe, because it's so free, and because of the limited hardware, it's such a lightweight headset to wear. But yeah, of course, because of that, we had to and do a lot of optimizations, especially for the Quest. Only on the Quest, because we did PlayStation 2, but that was a very different kind of optimization for PlayStation than for Quest. For Quest, it was mainly the complexity that we had to compromise on. And what I mean by that is the light reflections on the materials of the walls or the canyons or on the zombies, and the texture quality on the zombies. And because I think we did a really good job on maintaining the gameplay of the game. It is almost exactly the same game as on PC, except for the graphics. That's the biggest compromise. And the second one was in the horde mode map. We had to make a compromise on how many zombies at the same time could be active, especially with 4 players and 4 avatars and with all the multiplayer stuff going on. But in the end, I think we had a very good board. I think I'm very proud of what we made.
Yeah, you should be proud of what you've made, and I can tell you the multiplayer runs very smoothly for what we're doing. You know, it's quite amazing that you can play with people all over the world in one VR map and not have crashes. When you talked there, Arjen, about how the optimizations were very different from the Quest to the PSVR, what was different about the PSVR? What did you have to optimize there that you did or didn't do on the Oculus Quest?
For PSVR, it was mainly on the CPU side. So that was the challenge of so many zombie AI at the same time. And at the time we were using, we were still using Unity as an engine, but we were also using Unity audio at the same time. And we're using a lot of audio to make that world really alive. And that was just heavy on the CPU side. For example, on the Quest, we switched from the Unity default audio systems to integrating FMOD, which greatly optimized that part for Quest. And funny enough, the Quest was actually really strong in terms of CPU, and the GPU was a bit on the weak side, basically. So it was more of a GPU challenge on the Quest and a CPU challenge for us on the PlayStation.
I see. And for people that don't know too much about the Quest's hardware, what about it is limiting? Is the GPU just, can't be compared to PC GPUs? And even with the PSVR, do they just have stronger hardware there?
The Quest is using a very mobile chip set for all its calculations. So it's basically the same as what you have in your phone, except they did a very good job on basically overclocking that chip and having enough cooling to support that. So we can get much more power out of that chip than just a normal phone, which just allows us to do VR. And it was basically on all fronts. The CPU was the strongest part of the three, and the three I mean the GPU and the memory. We only had 2 GB of memory to work with, and we had to share that memory between the GPU and the CPU, which was also a challenge. It was basically juggling, okay, do we have a lot of zombies which takes in CPU power, or amazing views which takes up GPU power? So yeah, that we said also in articles, we basically made it from the ground up in terms of creating the objects and creating the scenes and creating the views and tools to support all that stuff.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I never thought of it from that perspective of having to choose which parts of the game that you strengthen or you have to make compromises on. And I personally love the game. It's one of my favorite games in VR, and it's one of the reasons I actually bought the Oculus Quest. But you can read lots of forums, and you have people online that always give their criticisms. And one of the main cons that reviewers say is that compared to some other games they played, maybe Arizona Sunshine has a bit of a simpler or more basic story. Was there any reason that Vertigo Games kind of decided to roll with a more simple story and not something that has like a crazy amount of lore or like a really long RPG element? Was there a reason you kind of went for more action-oriented gameplay rather than focusing on a really deep narrative?
That's a good question. At the time that Arizona Sunshine was created, I think the team was about 6 or 7 people. So there was not a lot of space to have these enormous stories and lore. And basically, we're kind of the opinion that the gameplay matters the most. So shooting the zombies must feel amazing. And the story only strengthens that aspect. And we basically choose not really the in-your-face story, like the character talks and you receive some information on the radio, but we also try to put the story in the levels. Like you see some things in the levels and you think by yourself, oh, what happened here? And kind of let the player imagine what happened there and what the story is, which is a little bit an effect of having a small team, because we cannot cover all that ground. You kind of have to put something up to imagination.
For sure.
I think that really worked out well, actually, because also the story was a bit simplistic, but it was really well told, and especially the voice actor is really amazing in that regard. So
Yes.
it's basically an effect of what we could do. Basically with the team size and what we could do.
Yeah, for people that haven't played, the voice actor is really amazing. He brings like the simplest and smallest lines to life, and you can really feel like you're there. And you talked a little bit there, Arjen, about storytelling in VR, and it's a topic that I'm very interested in and that we've talked about on the podcast in the past. When you're building a game and building a story in VR, is it quite different to how somebody would develop a story for a normal 2D game? Do you kind of have to take other things into account and let the player discover the story on their own more than you would for a 2D game?
Very different from a normal game, in the regard that in a normal 2D game you have almost absolute control of what the player sees. It's only a screen and your mouse and movement, and at any time you can say, okay, stop playing for a moment, have this cutscene, or have this soundbite, or focus on this. And with VR, it's all free, and if you don't want to block the camera or the controls, because that feels really weird in VR, especially the camera aspect. If you slow it down or stop or force the player to look a certain way, then people get sick. That's like literally motion sickness, because the movement doesn't match what they see. So it's really difficult to get the player to focus on a certain point. You have to really work your level design in a good way, like to flow, let the player flow to one part of the level, and kind of hope that they see the things that you put in there. And one part of it is that in Arizona Sunshine we have these little interaction circles, and with kind of hints, oh, something is there, and then people look at it and then you get like a prompt. Because then we know the player is looking at this, and we can give them some information.
Yes, very interesting. And so the game's been out for quite a long time now. You've released the Damn DLC, Deadman DLC, and you just spent a lot of time, I'm guessing, on optimizing it for Oculus Quest 2. Are there any future updates that you and the team plan to do, or is this game kind of in the books and Vertigo Game is focused on their next projects?
Well, the Quest 2 patch, which brings a lot of amazing stuff, we just brought it out. And we're always working on Arizona Sunshine. We always have some ideas and some thoughts, but we also have another big project coming up, which is after the fall. So we're going to have to pick and choose which we want to do. And the realistic side is that Arizona Sunshine is a 4-year-old game, and we're going to have to make the next big thing. That's our goal. That's our vision. So we're keeping it in mind. We have ideas and plans, but I cannot say anything about it, when or what. But it's always on the planning.
Yes, cool. And I've been looking forward to After the Fall for some time now. I'm not sure how much you can or can't say on this podcast, but could you tell our viewers a little bit about what that game is about, or what the gameplay is going to be like, or what the project is, or the genres of it?
I cannot say that much, except for what basically is already out there. It's a 4-player co-op shooter, an action shooter. It also features, it's kind of the same aspect in Arizona, beautiful levels with a lot of enemies. We're basically focusing on way more enemies and have the gunplay way more interesting, and focus more on the multiplayer aspect, especially because we saw it done so well on Arizona Sunshine. In Arizona Sunshine, we only have the 4-player in Horde mode, and After the Fall is going to be a 4-player experience from beginning to the end.
I see. And that's coming out on all platforms, or is it just Quest, Rift, and PC VR? Is it coming out on PSVR as well?
I'm not sure.
It's only announced for PC and PlayStation for now.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
PC,
okay,
PlayStation, cool. And I cannot say more.
Of course. And on the Oculus store, it just says coming soon. Again, if you can't say it, don't worry, but can we expect it before the end of 2020? Is everything kind of going as scheduled?
I'm just going to say we're very busy on it, and it's going to launch after the fall, somewhere after the fall. Well, jokes aside, I cannot say any date yet, but we're working very hard on it.
No problem, and I wish you the best of luck, because I'm very, very much looking forward to that. So let's switch gears a little bit, Arjen, and let's talk about virtual reality, the industry in general. That's basically what this podcast is for, talking about the state of VR and how things are changing. So one thing that I always love to ask VR developers, since they're in the thick of it and they're the ones who are innovating this industry, presumably the finish line for VR is a true deep dive experience akin to, the fiction that we see in Ready Player One or Sword Art Online, when you have these full deep dive experiences where you can't tell reality from this fictional world. If that deep dive experience is the true end goal, in your experience and in your opinion, how far have we come? How close are we to that finish line of getting something that you truly can't differentiate reality from?
I feel that we're just at the very beginning of it all. Because the very first time you put on a VR headset, it's like, wow, it's so much better than anything I've played before, because you're really in it, and you can see so much more. But then the closer you get to a realistic version, the more like flaws you're gonna notice. And then you're gonna start notice, I don't really feel the wind, I cannot really smell anything in this world. And continuing that train of thought, it's like, we're gonna have so much more stuff to develop before we get really that, what you say, the deep dive VR experience. And the end goal is not even in sight. And because how far can you go? Because now we only have, I think, reached the very start of it.
Mm-hmm. And if we're not, so your opinion is like we're not very close to it yet, we're just at the start. What do you think is holding the industry back? Is it the hardware that we need to wait to catch up to what you want to do? Is it that the industry is just too young? There's not enough people in it? What do you feel is holding the industry back from getting that push towards true immersion?
Well, I don't really know the specifics on like creating implants or something, because I think that's going to be the very close thing to like actually projecting the images in your head or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've no idea. It's and I don't know that Oculus, by what they've done so far with like the wireless Quest and with the hand tracking, and yeah, you also see some other companies doing something with eye tracking, which is also really interesting. So I think all those things together will tell us, okay, this works. We're going to iterate on this, or this doesn't work, and then yeah, hopefully it all comes together at the end, maybe in 10 years or something. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. You touched on a few things. You touched on a few things there, like eye tracking. And one of the things or aspects that I'm interested in is haptics. You get lots of these companies that are making haptic vests or, haptic rifle stocks. Do you think haptics are one way to go to make VR more immersive? And is Vertigo Games kind of interested and investing time in optimizing their games to work with these haptic devices? Do you see a future of the industry moving towards these accessories?
Yeah, I think some of them really work. Besides the normal consumer games you have here, we also making stuff for arcades, which are more location-based VR, which is something you cannot do at home. So you can actually walk around, move around, and we've been experimenting also a little bit with props, levers, and walls that you can actually touch. And also what you said with guns or props. And I think, for example, the rifle props really add to the experience because they're so close to what you see in VR. But the funny thing is actually, we did some experimentation with a company called Nomadic. They made actually props like walls and levers and buttons. Is that when people first did that experience, first they were amazed by the VR, and then they started touching stuff. But once they were able to shoot zombies and play the game, it didn't matter. The game was the most important thing. And then the rifle really adds, and they were just shooting and shouting and playing. And then it doesn't matter if there's a real wall or not. Yeah, the game was the most important part. So yeah, some of them really works, like for example, a rifle or like some, it sort of feels like a gun. And some others, yeah, it's a very niche thing, could work, but yeah.
You talked a little bit there about arcades, which I found really cool, especially since you said Vertigo started with such a small 6 to 7 person team. I remember last year I was home in Canada and I took my friends to VR Arcade, and Arizona Sunshine was one of the main games that they were pushing. Maybe you or Tamtu sitting next to you can talk a bit about the market that Vertigo has created. Do most of your sales come from one particular platform? Are you mainly focused on consumer VR, or do you guys focus on catering to these big arcades?
Well, I don't know anything about sales, but I know that the arcades market is growing. There's a lot of people interested in that kind of stuff, especially, for example, some company parties or something. Instead of booking a go-kart, they will book an arcade VR experience. Mm-hmm. So in that regard, it does really well. And our focus is, yeah, the consumer VR games. And based on that core game, we kind of like, experimenting in the VR, in the arcade section. Okay, how can we make this even more awesome with, for example, the expensive props and the space? That's basically the story. I'm not sure if Tamtu wants to add to it.
Yeah, VR arcades are a very important pillar to our strategy in making sure that VR development expands, not just in home but out of home as well. Like you know how sometimes some theme parks have adapted VR to their rides. That's really cool, but also very niche. And so the closest thing that arcades can do is offer an out-of-home location-based experience. And apart from the games that we develop internally already for the home headsets, we do have experiences and games developers that focus on titles specifically for VR arcades as well. So that's a market that that's growing as well, and something that we really support as well.
Yeah. I know that when I worked on some of these arcades levels, we designed those on 6x6 meters, and with some clever level design, you just got lost. You kind of walk these 6x6 meters, and then you go in the game. Then you go into some elevator, and then you go down the floor, and you step in some cart, and then you feel like you traverse this enormous space, but you're still on these 6x6 meters, and it feels amazing actually just to get lost in that world. And then you put off your headset and you're in some completely different environment where you started in, and it's a lot of fun.
Yes, I've had some of those experiences myself. I'm not sure if the one you're talking about is T for God, but that's a cool one that's on SideQuest. It's really similar. And you talked a little bit earlier about developing these new experiences and how at Vertigo Games you're trying to push the envelope and always focus on the gameplay. And I'm interested to hear, as a developer, what changes or advancements do you want to see in the VR industry in the next 5 years? What's something that you wish that the Oculus Quest headsets had that would just make your life easier and that would allow you to make better games and more immersive games?
Let's think. Well, one of the difficult things was the limited hardware on the Quest. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, that's kind of forced us to optimize the game better. So now our next game is going to be even more optimized, but then hopefully with a little bit with better graphics, because we learned from the past. So in that regard, it's cool to have these limited hardware devices, mm-hmm. but a little bit extra power, like the Quest 2 offers us, with which we showed with the Quest 2 patch. We can just finish the game basically. It's more particles, more feedback, more polish in the game. So I think the way they're going now with the Quest 2 and, for example, the hand tracking is really interesting. So I think they're going the right way on it, and there's so many more players on Quest and Quest 2 in comparison to just PC VR. It's actually insane, and more players is just more fun and more content, and we can do more stuff with more players.
So, as you said, there's lots more players on Quest now than there ever were before. And I think part of that is due to the coronavirus. Most people are staying inside. And while it's not a good thing, I think that the coronavirus has helped push the VR industry to new heights, just because, more people are inside, more people are looking for ways to feel like they're outside when they're stuck at home. And I think that's one of the amazing things that VR does. But it wasn't always like that, and I was reading a few interviews to prepare for this podcast, and in 2017, there was this article with the CEO of RocketWorks, and he was quoted saying that there is no money in VR game development, and people shouldn't do it. Do you think this is still true in 2020? Why or why not?
In comparison to console development or other AAA companies, it's peanuts, because it's so small and there's not a lot of players and not a lot of headsets to sell. It's very expensive to step into VR. And right now it's way easier with the Quest. You just put it on and you can play. But like a couple of years ago, with, for example, the Vive, you have to set up these sensors and you have to calibrate, and you're more time spending on setting everything up than playing the game. So in that regard, it's already easier to get players inside VR, which makes the market automatically grow bigger because it's way more attractive. You don't need a very expensive PC to play all these cool games. But in regards to what he said, it's actually, I think it's true, because it's very small and niche still, but you can see it's kind of a small explosion happening in terms of players and accessibility to VR. It's basic, yeah, and also the culture. It's the gaming culture gets more accepted. If you say 10 years ago that you were a gamer, you were like a nerd. You know, I don't want to hang out with you. But now it's like, especially with the new generation, I think it's way more accepted that people just game. So the console market is still growing, and VR is just like following in its footsteps. That's how it feels anyway.
Yeah, and I think you're right there with how Oculus Quest really did change the game. I was into VR from the heyday. I remember I went to my friend's house and he had a $2,000 Vive setup. He also had a $1,000 laptop. So you're right, it was a huge investment for people back in those days. But right now the Quest is $299 USD. It's cheaper than the Xbox, cheaper than the PS5. I think that's really going to make a big difference here. One thing I normally ask VR developers to get their opinion on is, when do you think that the number of VR gamers will match or surpass the number of console gamers there are in the world? Do you think that's something that'll happen in the next 5 years, the next 10 years?
It kind of depends if it stays in gaming. I know that Oculus and Facebook is really pushing it for the social aspects as well as the gaming aspects, and maybe merging a little bit. But also because it's already established. If you want to play the next Zelda or Mario, you need a Nintendo Switch, and it's never going to coming to VR. Yeah, maybe it does. I don't know. It could be because they have the Nintendo Labo VR as well. So who knows? But if it's somehow, I'm a game developer, so I don't know. But somehow it's way better to communicate, like we do now on Zoom. It's something like Zoom VR or something, which is way better in some aspect. Then it could explode and like everyone using a VR headset, or maybe it becomes even more accessible than the Quest already is. Then it could also explode. Mm-hmm. So it has a lot of possibilities, and I'm very interested to see where it goes. But
Cool. And on that note about Facebook and Facebook Horizon, one of the big things in VR news recently was the announcement that Facebook would require new Quest users to create a Facebook account. As somebody who's part of the industry, how do you guys feel about that? Were you worried that this would put people off of VR? Do you think that, it's just something that's out of our hands? Or what's your opinion on that news story?
My personal opinion is that it doesn't matter that much, I think. The moment Oculus got bought by Facebook, it was kind of expected, actually, but me personally. But I get why it's scaring people off a little bit, because now Facebook is in my Oculus and it's even closer than it was before. Like it was already on my phone, now it's in my VR and I see it everywhere. So I understand the scariness, but I think it's not a bad thing that it happened. Not necessarily a bad thing, let's say, put it that way.
And one question I had that I came up with recently, it's probably not something that you prepped for. I've been playing Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, been playing a lot of Arizona Sunshine, lots of these gory zombie games. And one thing I kind of thought about is, you remember those days where people were getting angry about Grand Theft Auto, how much violence there was in Grand Theft Auto. I feel like the amount of violence or gore that's acceptable in a 2D game is probably more than what might be acceptable in a VR game. Do you guys ever have kind of chats or discussions about ethics or morality of what you can or shouldn't include in a game in VR, since it is more immersive and these people will be doing these actions with their own hands rather than just pressing a button?
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting point. At least my colleagues and I are discussing those points, like, is this too far maybe? Or can we do this, but maybe package it in a gamey way so we don't really say, okay, do this, but it's do this, but in a game manner. for example, in Arizona, Sunshine, you shoot zombies, of course, but nothing holds you back from putting the gun on your head and shooting yourself. You know, that's a very ethical stuff. Do we let the player kill himself, yes or no? And we choose not to, yeah, for obvious reasons, because we don't really want to support suicide. But yeah, it's one of the things we're like, yeah, can we do this, yes or no? So yeah, we have a lot of discussions about it, and there's always new stuff coming up. We had in some arcade level, we had a train coming by, and what if the player stands inside of on the rails, you know, and let the train, and then because that happened when we play tested it, and we're like, oh, we're not really, maybe people get confused and think that real life also you get respawned, and you know, you can redesign the level and that it never happened, that only the zombies get killed by the train, not the players. So yeah, it's a really point of discussion, and we actively think about it when we implement all these new features in our games.
Cool. HackerNoon has a really big developer readership, and some of the people watching this might be amateur game developers or even professional game developers like yourself. What is a big complication that you and your team experienced either building a new game or porting your games to the Quest? What's like can you think of a learning you had that maybe if you teach this to other developers, it might save people headaches down the road? Was there any really big issues you had when porting games to the Quest?
Well, I think one tip I can give developing multiple platforms, don't be afraid to just cut stuff out of your game just to make it run. And that doesn't necessarily mean release with that kind of state. But in the very early prototypes of Arizona Sunshine, it was just a cube world, and we only were focusing on the gameplay. Only zombies, only shooting, see if we can get the same gameplay on the Quest as on PC, because that was very important to us. And then add all the other stuff to the game. I think that was the biggest, interesting part from the Quest development. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thanks very much, Arjen and Tamtu. That was all of the questions I had for today. But before you go, maybe the two of you can let our viewers know what Vertigo Games is working on, what people can be excited for in the near and the far future.
But we're actively working on After the Fall, the next big 4-player co-op shooter. We're also releasing Traffic Jams in a couple of months, I think. And the arcades is still booming, so check out if in your local area, if Arizona Sunshine is playable. If so, go there because it's really fun. And I think you can find us at Vertigo Games on Facebook, Twitter. I don't know if we have a Twitch. Yeah, we have a Twitch. And After the Fall specific content, we have a Twitter for that. It's After the Fall VR, I think. So check that out. And yeah, I think that's it.
Cool, and we'll definitely have all of the links to Vertigo Games' social media and websites in the show notes below, so be sure to check that out. Thank you very much for your time, Arjen and Tamtu. This was a really fun conversation.
Yeah, that was fun for us too. Something different than making games.
Thank you for watching another HackerNoon podcast. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to give us a like and subscribe to the channel for more future podcasts on virtual reality. Also, be sure to catch Vertigo Games on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. Thanks, and see you next time.